Chapter 186. You should get out of here, my father said to the servant standing far away. Yes, yes, I don't know if this place was quite uncomfortable. The servant quickly left the room without looking back. When the door was closed, my father's fierce eyes turned back to Perez. Then, Perez's shoulder was seen wince slightly. My father is just a father, but it's the first time I've seen Perez like this. See you after a long time, Lord Lombardi. Perez greeted my father first. Yes, indeed. But my father didn't smile. Always, there was a friendly smile that my father showed everyone as a habit. It's been a long time since I saw you, and Your Highness the Second Prince has become my daughter's fiancé. It's Perez's face became more perplexed. Perez, who stood upright and was very nervous, answered seriously. There are circumstances involved in that. It's hard to explain everything. A contractual engagement, my father said, cut off Perez's words. I've heard from Tia. Then I got a familiar and friendly smile on my father's face looking toward me. Our Tia, who grew up well since childhood and hasn't been spoiled, made such a decision. I was wondering what the reason was. However, my father's eyes looking back at Perez turned cold. But tell me, the second prince. My father's low voice made a long speech. It's just a contractual engagement, but Your Highness the Second Prince. My father looked at Perez one by one with a sharp gaze somewhere. It was an eye filled with something indescribable, distrust. Oh, Dad, please. But in front of such a father, Perez couldn't even speak a word properly. Sigh. After a small sigh, I finally stepped up. Dad, yes, Tia. My father replied with a smile, unlike when he was staring at Perez. Me and Perez, it's a contractual engagement, so there's nothing to worry about. Worried. Dad doesn't worry. Our Tia is know how to do it all well. My father's hand stroked my head, so I thought it was over. Then my father glared at Perez halfway again. But when I saw the second prince, I couldn't help but think again about the engagement of my golden daughter. Without a word, letters, and the whole empire. Perez couldn't answer my father's words, which were largely aimed at provoking guilt. He didn't look very good, as if he had been beaten hard in the stomach by someone. My father approached Perez, who was standing still because he became silent. Then he put his hand on his shoulder and asked, So this early morning, what did the second prince say was in my daughter's room? I was asking Lady Lombardi if she could give me a room to stay in Lombardi's mansion for a few days. Ah, my father, who was still listening to Perez, smiled slowly only then. I'll help you with that. You don't have to do that yourself. No, come with me now. The butler will also be up by now. Eventually, Perez had no choice but to walk as my father led him. Perez, who once looked back at me with a lingering face, slowly began to move toward the door. His shoulders were drooping, showing signs of unwillingness to go. But my father was adamant. My father, who pushed Perez out of the door, came back smiling and told me, Breakfast with what Dad has prepared, Tia. We'll see you again at lunch. The door closed with a click, and I realized I was left alone. Perez, is he okay? My father looked angry for some reason, but then the smell of hot pancakes came up between the slanted open food covers. My stomach is growling. Well, he'll take care of it. Don't tell me someone like Perez would be bullied by someone like my father. Grandfather is the only person in this mansion who can really pick on Perez. Dad's gonna drink like that for a while. I thought so lightly and lifted the fork. Never dreamed that Perez would have been taken to the main building of the mansion and had a very uncomfortable breakfast with my grandfather and father. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. A time full of afternoon sunshine. Empress Rabini held tea time after a long time. Since the failure to pass the law of succession to the first son, it was an empress who lived a quiet life for a while, so all of the entourages of Rabini filled their seats. Among them, the Lord of Sisu was the main character. Considering his appearance and past experience as a knight commander, he seemed to have no connection with tea time, but the scene of him sitting right next to the empress and lifting the teacup matched with his delicate white porcelain. In front of countless guests, the empress showed off her friendship by having a friendly conversation with Chanton Sisu. In the meantime, I was not feeling well, so I was very proud of the Lord. I hope you don't feel too bad. You don't have to worry about that, Empress. Empress Rabina's smile deepened in response to the polite response of of Sisu. I love the sunshine. Shall we walk for a while? The Empress suddenly suggested. Sure. After a brief silence, Lord Osusu nodded. The eyes of the people who attended the tea time caught the eyes of the two who got up together. Let's take the sponsor for a short walk. Here we go. As a former knight, Lord Sisu began to escorting the Empress with polite manners. Curious eyes followed, but the Empress smiled more secretly as if she was enjoying it and left the refreshment table. Before long, the two people were walking leisurely in their leisurely patronage. The Empress was confirmed that there was no one around, opened her mouth. There was a good harvest this year. Still, her beautiful eyes stayed somewhere far away, as if enjoying a walk. Many of the empire's people rely on western grain crops. Empress Rabini said in a soft line with red lips. I am very grateful. It wasn't an empty word. The mortality rate of the common people in Angenas had fallen sharply, thanks to the cheap supply of the Sisu grain crop. Originally, because of the soil that was not suitable for farming, Angenas had more famine than flat crops. Since Angenas had to lose a large amount of money for the aid Even in nominal terms, Susu's cheap grain was like a lifesaver for the present Angenas, especially when the capital of Angenas has dried up like a drought land like these days. I have high expectations for the Lord of the West. I'll try harder to live up to that expectation, Empress. Yes, but the Empress, who suddenly stopped walking, blurted her speech. I have a problem these days. I'm sorry to go. At first glance, it was a very difficult expression. However, Chanton Susu could feel that Empress' blue eyes were closely watching his reaction. What concerns do you have? The Empress replied, looking straight at Chanton. In the meantime, the size of the land that Anjana secured as collateral by borrowing money from the Susu family has become quite large. It was a matter of course. For less than a long time, the Anjanas borrowed astronomical sums from Susu. In short, Anjanas tried to make up for the excessive Western development project and the failure of the law of succession of the first son with the money of Susu. As a result, more than half of the Anjanas estates were secured in debt. In other words, more than half of Anjanas came under the hands of Susu. Yes, Empress. However, Lord of Sisu nodded silently, with a face that did not show his true feelings. But that's why I'm suddenly worried. That's not going to happen. But what if Sisu is really greedy about our and Jenna's estate? The smiling Empress' eyes were sharp. Of course, I believe in the word of the Lord of Sisu. It's the words of the Lord saying, I am not interested in the land of Anjanas, which is dried up. Lord of Sisu kept his mouth shut instead of answering. The Empress, who was staring at such a response, continued, for the alliance of Anjanas and Sisu that will continue, and furthermore, in order for me to be able to trust the Susu family, or I believe that we need to strengthen our faith and trust in each other. Faith and trust. Chanton Susu's eyes, which were indifferent to the words, became fierce, but it happened in a moment. The Empress did not notice it that, of course, it's not that I don't believe in the Lord of Susu, but the Empress' blue eyes were saying the exact opposite. Something led the Empress to doubt Susu. Whether it comes simply from the realization that I looked back and saw that too much land was taken as collateral for Susu, or she didn't know it if there was anything more than that. What can I do? Chanton Susu asked in a low voice. The Empress is so just die, please. End of chapter 186. Chapter 187. It was terrible, Perez, who flopped down next to me, said, washing his face dry. It was a very tired voice. After having lunch with my father, I met Perez again near the smoke screen on the annex side. So you had breakfast with my father and grandfather. My father, who took Perez out of my room in the morning, took him to the main dining room, where my grandfather was having breakfast. I just haven't seen him in a few hours. But Perez had a very tired face for that moment. Was that breakfast? I feel like it's been a few hours. It was only 4 hours ago. Ah, Perez replied blankly with a face that seemed to be fluttering in the autumn wind blowing his hair. Now, stop your mind about it, Perez. Oh, there they come. I got up after tapping on Perez's back. It was because I could see people waiting in the distance approaching. Tia, Tia, it was Gilio and Mayron who found me and ran away with dirt and dust. The Knights of Lombardy have been training camps over the past few months, so I have not met the twins for quite some time. Horse camp training, it's more of bull training. The atmosphere of the two had changed a lot in those months. Long time no see. I missed you, although their unique mischievous smile didn't change at all. I heard you two became a late at ano, I heard you two became a teeth leader. Congratulations. It was the news I heard in advance through Shannonette. I heard in the history of the Knights of Lombardy that people who are promoted as fast as you two are among the best. The twins shrugged at my words. Of course. Who are we? Just in case, just because we're Lombardi doesn't mean we're convenient. Right, that nasty piece of work. Oh, the twins trembled, talking about the Knights of Lombardy. Then another person came from behind the twins. Hello, Lady Lombardi. As expected, you look good in a sword suit, Lady Brown. Ramona, who tied her thick and vivid red hair up high, laughed a little embarrassed by my compliment. Thank you, lady, but why did you call me this in this outfit today? Ramona looked at the twins and Perez with a slightly confused look, blurring her speech. We have business with that over there. You haven't forgotten, Your Highness the Second Prince. Perez rose from his seat at the provocation the twins confidently made. Where does the person who was sitting with a pale complexion go? Perez, who stood up holding the sword lying next to him, looked down slightly at the twins, who were a little shorter than him, curled up one corner of his mouth. Alone, or it would be nice to just fight with two people at once, which will shorten the time. What? What? We're not who we used to be. This time the twins burst out at Perez's provocation. The three began to growl as if they would start hitting their swords at any moment. Wait, but I cut in between and said, it shouldn't be a confrontation between the two and Perez. Gilio laughed triumphantly at my words. Sure, I'm alone is enough. No, even the Lady Brown is united, and the three of you are dealing with Perez. Tia. The twins looked at me with a devastated look on their faces, but it was not the time to be swayed by such things. There was something else I wanted to check now. Asterisk. Tick. Myron clicked his tongue quietly. It was because Perez, standing in front of his eyes with a sword, felt like a wall. Damn it. The same as his brother Gilyu. A low murmur heard from a distance. Mayron looked away from Gilyu and looked at Ramona Brown. Tia already knows the story of the famous Brown family. It is now called the Imperial Swordsmanship, but it was known to anyone who learned the in the Empire that the original form was the Brown swordsmanship of the Brown family, and the fact that the Brown family had released the swordsmanship, the secret of the family solely for the prosperity of the Empire. For Mayron, a knight of Lombardy, but also a knight of the Empire, being able to match swordsmanship with someone from the Brown family was an honorable thing to be proud of to anyone in the future. Come, then Perez spoke lowly. It was a very small voice, but Gilio, Mayron, and Ramona jumped out to Perez without hesitation. Ha! Gilio launched the first attack. It was a very sharp and fast sword, digging into Perez's side. Clang, clang. But Gilio's sword attack was too easily blocked by Perez, but Mayron aimed at the gap. He took a big step and drew the sword sideways. It was an attack aimed at the front of Perez, who had been empty to block Gilio's sword. Group. The sound of blades clashing against each other was heard strongly. When Mayron opened his eyes wide, the swords of Gilio, Mayron, and Perez Gilio, Mayron, and Perez were already tangled. Perez just stepped back and opened his body to block two swords flying from different directions at once. Oh, in an instant, a painful moan erupted from Gilio's mouth, whose hand holds the sword snapped. It was then, whoosh, a heavy sword fell sharply with an eerie wave of sound. Break. Perez recoiled the twin sword and leaned back sharply. The red hair fluttered greatly in the place where the sharp tip of the sword was narrowly deflected. Ramona, who recovered her ferocious sword, fixed her sword and grabbed it, then began to thrust the sword long into Perez. Whoosh, whoosh, the sound of an arrow flying rang from Ramona's sword. That's it, Gilio and Mayron realized at the same time. Ramona's sword technique is one of the Imperial sword tests. The twins also grabbed the sword and joined the attack. Whoosh, whoosh, at the same time, three swords flew in after Perez. Eventually, the tip of Mayron's sword scratched Perez's forearm shallowly. Splash! Red blood splattered with a small noise. Gilio's sword aimed at Perez's leg and stabbed it. As soon as the blade penetrated, Perez's body shook wildly. It's an opportunity, the twins thought at the same time. Finally, they naturally moved the center of their body to poke the sword harder. But at that moment, Perez's body disappeared as if he had completely disappeared from the place. They turned their body late, following Perez, who suddenly disappeared from view. But it was too late. Perez had already escaped the siege of the swordsmanship that Gilio and Mayron had made. Oh, to catch up with Perez, the two squeezed their chest and turned their bodies forcibly, but they couldn't come out of the body that was already distracted. Eventually, they managed to correct their staggering bodies and tasted a sense of defeat. After deliberately driving the attacking ones to one side, they couldn't help but escape as if disappearing. Totally played by Perez's movement. The twins who raised their heads were already convinced that Perez would be looking at them triumphantly from afar. By the way, Ghost, that's awesome, Mayron cried out despite himself. Perez stood still, unable to pull out his body as much as he wanted. Lady Brown, Ramona's sword was embedded in the ground, with the hem of Perez's robe tightly closed. At that point, Perez once gave strength to tear it apart, but that gap made a huge difference in the duel situation. Sometimes even life and death. If someone had taken that brief opportunity that Ramona had created and stabbed a new sword, Perez would already be out of action. I lost, but the declaration of surrender flowed from Ramona because Perez's sword tip lay in front of her neck. It was because Perez decided to kill Ramona, who lost her sword to use, after a momentary judgment that he could not move his body. If it had been a real battle situation, Ramona's sacrifice would have given the twins a chance to get the right blow. Good job. Perez took the sword in front of Ramona's face, speaking briefly. At the end of the battle, the twins cheered and ran to Ramona. Awesome, what the hell did you do? Right, you're obviously starting to stretch your swords later than us. How could you turn your body around already? It seemed to be moving twice as fast as us in a moment. I'm sure you're doing the same imperial swordsmanship as we are. It was completely different. Then a new voice interrupted the twins. Would you both step back a little? Lady Brown was surprised. It was Tia. As she said, Ramona, who had wielded a threatening sword a little while ago, was blushing embarrassingly. But it's because Tia doesn't know much about it. Apparently, she's running the same imperial swordsmanship, and she's the only one who's different. She has fewer muscles and weaker strength than us. Of course, it's normal to be slow. Really? Did it feel that different? Tia asked in a quiet voice. Of course. I've never seen a move like that in my experienced seniors. No, my leader. Mayron replied with great excitement. For a moment, I thought she was using a different swordsmanship, not an imperial swordsmanship alone. It's not imperial swordsmanship, it's a different swordsmanship. Tia nodded when she heard the twins' intense feelings, and she looked at Ramona with a sweet smile. As expected, then, what is it? It would be very useful if you use this well, while neutering meaningless words. End of chapter 187. Chapter 188. We left the training ground and came back to my house, twins, Perez, and Ramona. It felt like the drawing room was full of guests after a long time. My request for a swordsmanship fight must have been burdensome for you. Thank you, Lady Brown, I said to Ramona while pouring the warm tea. No, Lady Lombardi, you're working hard to help our family. I'll do whatever I can. But you know what? Can I ask you a question? Mayron and Gilio talked to Ramona with sparkling eyes. Yes, please, speak, young Lord Lombardis. Lady Brown, how good are you at the academy? Unlike Rainey, who chose the academy to study, twins have never been educated outside Lombardy. Lombardy's knights have been in charge of sword skills classes since they were young. It seemed they're a little curious. I wasn't very talented. I barely passed the academy entrance exam, Ramona answered cautiously. But Perez, who was listening to the conversation while drinking tea, whispered, in the beginning it was. What do you mean, Your Highness the Second Prince? Ramona graduated second in the sword department. The twins' eyes opened wide. Ramona was the only one who came out to practice earlier than me throughout her school year, from barely passing the entrance exam to graduating second. It was a passage that showed how hard Ramona was. I was lucky. I got a lot of things from the academy that I chose as a refuge to survive. A quiet voice spoke calmly. The motives that always keep me strong, and the dreams I want to achieve. For a moment, Ramona's gaze, who said so, was seen reaching Perez. I can't believe you entered the school to survive. You must have had a hard time, but a little while ago, Lady Brown's swordsmanship was very strong. Right, Lady Brown is a person who has a strong mind and ability to handle swords, the twins said to Ramona. If there's anything we can do to help, tell us. Lady Ramona is one of the few swordsmen we've recognized. Ramona's face turned red again at the words. I can't believe it's that different when she holds a sword and when she doesn't hold it. I believe that I'm already receiving the benevolence of the Lombardi family that will not be enough to pay for life. Ramona looked at me, saying that she had good eyes like a deep lake. I just hope that the day will come when I can repay this favor. Lady Brown, what a wonderful person. The twins nodded loudly as if they were deeply impressed. But what did you really do a little while ago? You know, you were suddenly getting a little faster. Did you learn it at the academy? Oh, that's Ramona smiled a little. I didn't learn it separately. It's brown swordsmanship. Huh? That's brown swordsmanship? Gilio was surprised. But there is no such part in brown swordsmanship. Mayron also tilted his head. What you two know is imperial swordsmanship, not brown swordsmanship. The answer came from Perez. These two things is different? Mayron asked in shock. Brown swordsmanship is swordsmanship that requires a long foundation, so it needed some improvements so that everyone could learn. The purpose was to improve the power of the empire by learning the swordsmanship of any person in the empire. Ah, so, also, after the collapse of the family, the people of the Brown family have been studying and developing the Brown swordsmanship, waiting for the day the family was reinstated. Some people, like my father, lost their right hand but started training their left hand from scratch. Their lives would not have been so different from Ramona's. They lost everything and fought for survival day by day, but they prepared for the day when the family would rise again. To think that someday, more advanced swordsmanship will become the power of the family. Wow, amazing. The twins were constantly amazed. The twinkling eyes seemed to be impressed by the Brown family story. I need to wake up and train. From tomorrow, I will study the Lombardi family's swordsmanship. I think they got a good stimulus. Hey, Lady Brown, why don't you show me that improved move one more time later? Yeah, we'll buy you something delicious. Ramona burst into small laughter at the twins' suggestion, and she answered, if you want, can I teach you the complementary parts? What? Gilio and Mayron were surprised and waved as if they were going to fall back. No, no, no. How could you teach us that? But Ramona was rather nonchalant. People in the Brown family hold swords from a very young age. There's no need to be picky about men or women. And on the first day of class, there is the first thing to learn. Ramona said, one letter at a time, to keep the black and to be strong together. What a Brown family creed. So, a long time ago, Lord of the Brown family revealed the Brown swordsmanship to everyone, and I have no qualms about keeping that word. Perhaps anyone in the Brown family would think so. Ramona will teach the twins the real Brown swordsmanship. It was a proposal. Lady Brown, I called Ramona. Are you serious about that? Yes. Ramona nodded briefly. That's what my father said yesterday. Once the family is reinstated, he'll reveal the improved Brown swordsmanship. I think it's a good way to raise the pride of our shrinking family. Then the plan becomes a lot easier. I felt like the final piece of my plan was being put together. It's also a great decision for the Brown family, who had been an imperial knight for generations until more than 40 years ago. I smiled at Ramona and said, perhaps the awkwardness has gone a little since then. Ramona smiled brighter than before. Despite the mischievous twins' words, the conversation continued. By the way, it was the first time I had ever seen Your Highness, the second prince, ever drink tea. I thought you didn't like tea. I don't really like water, but I drink tea that Tia made from time to time. Perez replied indifferently to Ramona's words. Ah, Ramona smiled blurrily, but Perez did not see the figure. The red eyes were looking at me, not that way. It was red and round red, like a drop of blood. I need to talk to you, Perez. As I rose from my seat saying so, I could feel Perez quietly following behind me. Where we headed was my study. Close the door. I said to Perez. He shut the door silently. Sit here. I pointed to the chair in front of the desk. This time again, as I say, Perez meekly sat down on the chair. Take off your clothes. Also, as I said, the hand of the guy who inadvertently tried to unbutton his shirt stopped, and he looked up at me standing with round eyes. Take off your clothes. Tia, Perez's eyes shook wildly. Even his long eyelashes trembled. I urged such a fellow. People are waiting outside. We're running out of time, so take it off. There are people out there. Perez murmured in a small voice, frowning his brows. However, he soon began to unfasten his buttons by teasing his finger that had stopped. His fingers, his fingertips seemed to tremble a little. Whoosh! The sound of the shirt slipping off the flesh was clearly audible. Wah! Along with the short breath that Perez exhaled, the guy's hard chest went up and down. Perez and my eyes met. I opened the desk drawer quietly, looking into the red eyes. There were clean bandages and vials in it. I'm glad I prepared it in advance. It's the medicine that Estira made, I said, handing Perez a round small box of medicine. Put it on. Just a moment ago, wounds on his forearm were being left untreated while confronting the twins. I knew this would happen. Perez accepted my medicine bottle and sat there staring up at me. Are you not going to apply it? Medicine, were you going to give it to me? Then, would you like some chocolate? Sigh. Perez suddenly let out a big sigh. Why? Why are you sighing? Perez, who had been looking at the medicine bottles alternately with half-resigned eyes, laughed and smiled in despair. I took the bottle back from Perez's hand and said, opening the lid, even if it's not that big a wound, it's definitely a sword cut. You have to apply for the medicine well. I took out the sticky ointment and applied it thoroughly to the wound. Anyway, I don't think it doesn't matter if you get one or two more scars anyway. Perez's half-open mouth closed again. And what was that sigh earlier? Perez was silent for a moment on my question and answered quietly, no, I like this too. The meaning of the phrase was still unknown, but I didn't think I had to dig it up. Perez would become a husband who obeys his wife's word. XD. But his long deep sigh bothers me, I said, putting a bandage over the wound on which the medicine was applied. If you receive treatment, well, I will give you chocolate. Perez replied with a laugh at me. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It's well past midnight. Bate was picking up and reading the papers one by one. At first glance, they were pieces of paper that seemed to be heating up, but they were classified and piled up one by one through Bates' eyes. The tedious work was repeated for hours, but Bates' face didn't show signs of exhaustion. However, over time, wrinkles formed between Bates' eyebrows. Huh? Bate, who had been staring at a piece of paper for a long time, took another piece of paper out of another package. That's weird. Mumbling low, Bate rubbed his brow. Something didn't add up. The information sent by the sources was unclear and confusing, but Bate could sort them out as real and fake and to connect things that seemed irrelevant at first glance, and he did a very good job of it. But there were days like today. It's hard to see the road as if it's covered with fog. He knows there's something beyond the fog, but he didn't pinpoint what it was. At times like this, you should take a break. Bate stood up, talking to him like that, and he approached and opened the window. As the cold dawn air rushed in, his tired head seemed to wake up a little. The sun is already rising. Bate, staring blankly at the sky, lit up a cigarette, but the red cigarette stood still to make long ash. Eyes blinked from time to time, fixed in the sky. Thoughts and thoughts followed one after another. The line that seemed irrelevant was revealed. The fog was clearing up. Then a cigarette fell from Bates' hand. As he was following the path, he began to see. Damn it. Bate, who sprang back to his desk, frantically searched the packet of papers. Chanton Sisu. It was the Lord of Sisu who was bothering him, like poking in the back of his head. After tea time at the Empress Palace, the whereabouts of the Lord of Sisu were unknown. End of chapter 188. Chapter 189. The place where I and Paris arrived with the fresh air of the morning was a large stable on the outskirts of Lombardy. It was the place where I had been with the twins and Laurel before. When I and Paris arrived, many eyes caught on, including the nobles who had come and gone, and the employees working in the stables. There's going to be a rumor. Although we announced our engagement, there were rumors people wondered about us who didn't get married in detail yet, so we intentionally took time to go out. Let's take a walk on a crowded road for now. We first walked leisurely along the surrounding trails, and I ate at a restaurant run by the stable and even ate dessert. People looked at me and Perez from a distance, gossiping, and didn't come close to talk. I felt like I was a celebrity. Tia. Then Perez suddenly reached out. His fingers brushed gently against my mouth. What is it? To be honest, I was surprised. My heart pounded, but Perez replied with a strange shrug. There's a crumb of cookie on your mouth. Well, then you can just say it. As my voice went up, Perez glanced around, sneaking his finger over my lips, and spoke in a low voice. We have an audience, so I have to show it properly. However, the corners of his mouth are slightly raised up. He's enjoying the situation. I gave Perez a look and got up. Now that we've shown them enough, let's go horseback riding. Perez also obediently followed me to the stable without a word. Here you are, Lady Florentia. Blank is ready over there. An employee caring for Lombardi's horse approached and politely informed. I've already stepped outside, Martha, and slowly approached the white horse waiting for me. Hi, Blank. Long time no see. The foal my father had given me for my birthday has grown up and become a horse. Thanks to the owner who doesn't have the hobby of running horses, we were only going to see each other once in the season. Blank flickered lightly, as if answering, blinking his big, gentle eyes as if she knew I was her owner. That's a very good word. Perez came up to the side and said, looking carefully at Blank, I can't believe you don't run such a great horse. That's why I'm here to learn. You should have time to learn how to ride a horse. I half shouted sarcastically at Perez, but I felt a little sorry when I saw Blank's eyes that looked only at me. Let's go out to the plains a little bit. Perez reached out to me, saying so. No matter how mild Blanc was, I had to get on Perez's horse together because it was too much to drive a horse by myself. Blanc also followed us well, without having to hold the reins separately. Perez's horse was such a large horse that the meadow overlooking it had a different taste than usual. It was the quietness that I felt after a long time. I said, holding my hair fluttering in the wind with one hand. Perez, how's everything going? There was no answer behind my back, but I could see that it was an unspoken affirmation. It's my job to bring the Brown family back into the aristocracy. But you know, it's your job after that, right? In my previous life, Perez was able to get through more difficult things and achieve what he wanted. Even if I don't check, I wonder if he's doing well on his own. But the Brown family's work was too important for him. The timing is important. Everything will have to go as you planned. I turned around saying that, and I ran into the red eyes that were looking at me very closely. Why? Perez asked quietly. Why is it so important to you that I become the crown prince? He was not asking questions. Perez seemed to be purely curious. Did you forget? I was the one who found you in the forest of the Imperial Palace. I smiled and put my hand on Perez's cheek. Yes, that's right. Perez smiled faintly at me too, and slowly lowered his head and kissed my forehead carefully. I closed my eyes unconsciously to the warmth. Oh, I'm going to get in trouble again, I said, pulling myself back halfway quickly. Now it's time to get acquainted with Blanc. That was when I tried to get off the horse. Wait, Perez said, wrapped around my waist strongly. Perez, something feels strange. Perez's face glaring at the empty meadow, where nothing was visible to me. We have to get back to the stable. Perez, who said so, turned around by pulling the reins of his horse strongly. It was that moment, chilling and goosebumps along my back. Is this the energy of mana that people say? Sometimes when Perez lifted his sword, the feeling I can feel was getting stronger. It was exactly focused at the direction Perez looked in. Damn it, Perez stomped hard into the horse's waist. Oh, as the horse was speeding up, my body faltered greatly. Slap, Perez spunked Blanc as he ran out, surprised Blanc to speed up and run away alone. Anyway, all this neighborhood was a meadow for horses, so I'll be able to find Blanc later, if I can survive this crisis. It was so powerful that I had such a fear in an instant. It's okay, Perez said, tightening my waist with his arm. Are they strong? I asked Perez. It was because I had never seen him so nervous. I can deal with it, if you're alone. Perez did not answer my question. He gritted his teeth and tried to speed up the horse. The sound of a scary running horse was getting closer. We were so easily overtaken, riding on a horse between two people, and now trying to speed up. From atop a slightly higher ridge, they came into a view. Shiver. I get goosebumps once again. It's them. Everyone's wearing black masks. I spoke to Perez, who was driving a horse forward. I said it as calmly as I could, but the end was a little shaky. Shing. At that time, the person who was running first drew the sword. At the same time, the hostility has become more blatant. It was that moment. Perez slightly winced, looked back for the first time, and frowned silently. Perez stared at the leading assassin for a few seconds. Look, I could even hear Perez clenching his teeth. Perez, do you curl up as much as you can? Perez told me, thinking you're hiding in my arms. Suddenly, Perez's voice became strangely calm, as if he had made a decision. I first made my body as small as possible, as Perez told me to. In the meantime, the assassins were closer, but for a while, the distance between us and them has no longer narrowed. Can't you speed up? It didn't seem like that. For a moment, it occurred to me that it gave Perez time to draw a sword. Shing. Fortunately, Perez pulled out the sword right away. As soon as that happened, the distance began to narrow again. Tuck, 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 tuck. The sound of a horse slamming into the ground sounded louder. Now they were just around the corner. Woo! Along with the vibrating noise, an aura sprang from Perez's sword. With a short roar, Perez and the leading man's sword struck hard. Clang! I closed my eyes unconsciously at the loud noise. And I thought, why the sword didn't cut off. In front of Perez's sword, coated with aura, the normal sword should be cut off. When I opened my eyes with my head up, I could see why. Ooh, the assassin's sword also had a blue aura. Crazy. I can't believe Perez is dealing with an assassin with aura. Just looking at it, the three that follow are far less than the leading men. Because I didn't feel that great energy from them. Clang, clang. Perez and the assassin's sword collided several more times. Something's wrong. Is that assassin is as powerful as Perez, but at the same time, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was weird. It was because the swords wielded by the assassin seemed to be sending warnings to Perez. Then Perez told me, "Now bend down." I curled up quickly. Whoosh! I heard a chilling sound. At the same time, something hot splashed on my cheek. There was a strong smell of blood. Oh, Perez groaned briefly through the pain. Did he got cut? I stuttered and moved my hand. The closer I got to Perez's back, the wet thing touched my hand. Blood? I muttered in disbelief. The blood dripped down until I could feel it with my fingertips. Clang, clang. The sword crash continued. But Perez's offensive was getting weaker and weaker. But then Perez's sword tip penetrated the assassin's gut and succeeded in cutting his legs. Oh! A low and short groan broke out from the assassin, and miraculously far away, Lombardi knights were seen. Lady Florentia! Lady Florentia! Finding me and Perez, they ran like crazy. Then the assassins turned their horse reins. Duck, duck, the sound of their horse hooves, which were heard right next to them, were gradually faded away. But I saw something strange. Finally, an assassin who was turning his horse head pulled something out of his arms. It was a dagger, strangely dark as blue, seen from the blade. And the assassin put it straight down Perez's thigh. Oh, the assassin then turned around as if he had done his duty. At that moment, I agonized. When you're stabbed, you shouldn't pull out the blade recklessly. But my instinct was speaking. Get the dagger out, quickly. I reached out and pulled it out. I was in such a hurry that I felt a slight cut on the tip of my finger, but I squeezed the handle even tighter so I wouldn't miss the dagger. It could be proof. Lady Florentia, Your Highness, the second prince. The moment I joined Lombardy's knights, my forgotten breath burst out all at once. Oh, oh, oh. Are you all right? Knights from the stables rushed to us. I still answered with a breathtaking breath. I'm fine. Then Perez's body, which was holding me tightly, tilted in an instant. Perez had already lost his mind. His face turned pale from bleeding, fell to the side without power. Fortunately, I said as I saw Lombardi's knight hold Perez, "We have to stop the bleeding as soon as possible." I couldn't say any more. Suddenly, it seemed like the world was getting dark, and the view became very narrow. Lady Florentia, like Perez, my body lost its balance and faltered. I can't lose consciousness yet. Somehow, I opened my blurred eyes and checked my hand holding the dagger. My finger that was cut while pulling out the sword was discolored black. I squeezed the sword into the knight's hand and said it word by word. On the sword, dark blue, poison." That was all I could say. Lady, lady. Even the sound of the knight shouting loudly grew farther and farther away. The memory unfolded like an after-image in a consciousness that faded as if falling asleep. The assassin's blue aura, who was on par with Perez's aura,